The whispers reached Nneka on a quiet night, caught in the flicker of a lone candle. They spoke of a place where fortunes were made if one dared. The room was cold when she arrived, though no wind stirred. At its center stood a coffin, black as a moonless sky, its edges carved with symbols that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. A woman in crimson, her face hidden by chains of gold, waited beside it. "Do you seek wealth?" the woman asked, her voice a serpent's hiss. Nneka nodded, her throat dry. "Then you will sleep here," the woman said, her fingers grazing the coffin lid. "Every night. The spirit of wealth will bless you, but it will take what it is owed." The coffin groaned open, revealing a velvet interior that shimmered as if alive. A foul chill escaped, carrying the faint scent of earth freshly disturbed. Nneka's pulse quickened. "Step closer," the woman urged. As Nneka leaned in, a shadow moved inside. Not a trick of light, something stirred, something waiting. A low whisper rose from within, too faint to understand, but heavy with dread. And then, as Nneka's fingers brushed the edge, the coffin breathed. Nneka lived in the heart of Lagos, where the city pulsed with endless chaos and opportunity, but never enough for people like her. Her one-room apartment in Makoko, perched precariously on stilts over murky water, was home and prison. The air always smelled of salt, sweat, and wood smoke, and the cacophony of yelling market vendors and blaring danfo horns never truly ceased. At night, the silence of the slum was broken by rats scuttling over corrugated iron roofs and the occasional splash of water as someone dumped refuse into the lagoon. But it was home. Nneka was a hairdresser, her hands quick and her fingers skilled, braiding intricate styles that left customers in awe. But the business paid just enough to keep her afloat. Every day began before sunrise, with a bucket of water drawn from a communal tap 2 streets away. By the time she returned, the neighbors were already yelling, arguing over who skipped the line or left the faucet dripping. Her shop was a wooden store, barely wider than her wingspan. She worked long hours, often skipping meals, braiding hair while swatting flies away from her face. Her greatest frustration came when her clients haggled her prices down to the bone. "Oh, Nneka, you're charging as if we're on the island," a woman scoffed once. "If you want island prices, then go there." Nneka snapped, but she knew the customer wouldn't leave. No one in Makoko had that kind of money. By nightfall, her hands would ache, her back stiff from bending over all day. Yet, her struggles weren't just about making ends meet, it was the shame of failing to rise above her circumstances. Nneka's 17-year-old sister, Ada, lived with her, though a lived often felt like burdened. Ada had dropped out of school when their mother fell ill and spent her days helping at the shop or at home. While they loved each other, Ada's bitterness at their situation often led to arguments. "You think braiding hair will change our lives?" Ada snapped one evening after Nneka brought home leftover rice and beans. "You should do something real, get a job in an office or marry someone rich." Nneka's response was silence. She didn't have the strength to fight after another long day. Obi was a carpenter whose shop was 2 stores down from Nneka's. He often repaired her broken tools or brought her roasted corn during the day. His jokes lightened her burdens, but there was an unspoken tension between them. He wanted more than friendship, but Nneka couldn't bring herself to entertain romance when her life was so unstable. "You're too stubborn," Obi teased one day as he handed her freshly carved wooden combs. "If you're not careful, you'll end up old and alone like Mama Agnes." Mama Agnes was the slum storyteller, always sitting in front of her shack, weaving tales of the old gods and the spirits who walked among men. Nneka often stopped to listen, her tired mind briefly carried away from her worries. One day, Mama Agnes told a story about the night spirits, beings that offered blessings, but at great cost. "They are not to be trusted," she said, her milky eyes gleaming. "Riches born from the spirits will always take more than they give." Nneka didn't believe in such things. She only believed in the hard reality of life and the hustle to survive. The market days were filled with bursts of color and energy, women in vibrant encore wrappers bargaining loudly, the smoky aroma of suya wafting from street corners, and the rhythm of talking drums from a nearby gathering. During the weekends, there were ceremonies, naming ceremonies, weddings, or burials, where neighbors danced to the beat of Fuji music, their laughter masking the shared hardship of slum life. Nneka rarely attended. She was too tired or too ashamed of her threadbare clothes to join. The day everything changed began like any other. Nneka had barely opened her shop when Ada came running, tears streaming down her face. Their mother's hospital bills had doubled overnight, and the doctor refused further treatment unless they paid. "We can't do this, Nneka," Ada cried, clutching her sister's arms. "She's going to die if we don't pay them." Nneka stood frozen, the weight of her sister's words crashing down. That night, sitting in their dimly lit room, she stared at the crumpled hospital bill on the table, her hands trembling. "Maybe Mama Agnes is right," she muttered to herself. "Maybe there's another way." Anyway, the whispers came to her that night, in the silence broken only by the creak of their roof and the distant sounds of Lagos never truly sleeping. They spoke of a coffin, of wealth, and of a choice that would change her life forever. The following morning, Nneka woke to chaos. She stepped out of her one-room apartment to find her store, her livelihood, destroyed. A fire had ripped through a section of the slum during the night, consuming the wooden structures. Her hairdressing store was reduced to ash, leaving nothing but charred combs and melted plastic. Obi, already there to assess the damage to his workshop, turned to her, his face grave. "I'm sorry, Nneka. I tried to save it, but the fire spread too quickly." Nneka's knees buckled, and she fell to the ground, staring at the remains of her hard work. The small savings she had scraped together to support Ada and pay their mother's hospital bills were gone. The flames had taken everything. Later that day, she went to see the landlord who rented her the store, hoping for a shred of mercy. Instead, she found him unmoved. "Do you think I can just let this go?" he barked, his voice rising above the clamor of the marketplace. "If you can't pay me for damages, then don't bother coming back here." Nneka left, her head pounding, her chest tight with despair. By evening, Nneka sat in her dimly lit room, staring at the cracked ceiling. Ada was silent for once, her usual frustrations replaced by a heavy gloom. The hospital had called earlier that day to remind them about the overdue bill. "She's going to die," Ada whispered, breaking the silence. "No, she won't," Nneka snapped, though her voice was hollow. She didn't believe her own words. She tried to hold herself together, but tears streamed down her face. Her hands trembled as she clutched the bill. Her dreams of building a better life had turned to ash, just like her store. That night, unable to sleep, Nneka wandered the streets of Makoko, the water beneath the slum lapping against wooden stilts. As she passed the elders' gathering spot, she saw Mama Agnes sitting alone, muttering under her breath. "They always come," the old woman said, her voice low but certain. "When desperation hangs heavy like smoke, they whisper their promises. Riches, they say, but they never speak of the cost." Nneka paused, her heart racing. "Who comes?" Mama Agnes didn't answer. She simply looked up, her milky eyes boring into Nneka's. "You will hear them. When the time is right, they will find you." By the time Nneka returned home, she was trembling. The whispers came again as she lay on her thin mattress, staring at the shadows that danced across the walls. At first, they were faint, like the rustle of leaves in the wind. But then, they grew louder, forming words she couldn't fully understand. "Wealth awaits if you dare." She bolted upright, her heart pounding. Ada stirred in her sleep, mumbling something incoherent. Nneka shook her head, trying to dismiss the whispers as exhaustion playing tricks on her mind. But as the night deepened, the whispers returned, weaving themselves into her thoughts. She couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching. The next morning, She made her way to Mama Agnes again, her desperation outweighing her skepticism. "What are they?" she asked. Mama Agnes smirked, revealing her yellowed teeth. "The spirits of the night. They come when your heart is heavy and your hands are empty. But mark my words, child. What they give, they always take back." "What do they take?" Nneka pressed. "Everything that matters." Later that evening, as the shadows lengthened over the narrow streets of Makoko, Nneka sat by Mama Agnes again, her mind weighed down by the warnings yet tethered to her desperation. "They whispered to me," Nneka said hesitantly, her voice barely audible over the rhythmic lapping of water beneath their feet. Mama Agnes tilted her head, her blind eyes narrowing. "Or, they've chosen you. The spirits don't whisper without purpose. What do they want?" "It's not about what they want, but what you want," Mama Agnes said, reaching into the folds of her wrapper. She pulled out a small, worn amulet, etched with symbols that seemed alive in the dim light of her flickering lantern. There is an old tale of a coffin, black as night, carved by hands no longer living. Those who sleep in it receive the blessings of the night spirits, wealth, power, success. But their gifts are double-edged. Nneka leaned in, her pulse quickening. "Tell me more." The elder chuckled darkly. "They say the coffin is not just a resting place. It's a doorway. A bond must be formed with the spirits each night. To break it is to invite ruin." Mama Agnes began to chant, her voice dipping into an old dialect that Nneka barely recognized. "The spirits of the night are born from suffering. They were once ancestors denied proper burial, their wealth stolen, their bodies forgotten. Now, they grant riches to those desperate enough to ask, but at a cost. Your soul, your mind, your connection to life itself, these are the things they crave." Nneka swallowed hard. She'd grown up hearing tales of spirits and curses, passed down in whispers during long nights. But she dismissed them as superstition. Now, sitting here under Mama Agnes's unwavering gaze, she felt the weight of those stories pressing down on her. "Why would anyone do this?" Nneka asked, her voice shaking. Mama Agnes shrugged. "Why does anyone risk the gods' wrath? Desperation, child. When you've lost everything, even the most dangerous path seems worth it." Nneka's chest tightened. Her mother's face flashed in her mind, frail and fading on a hospital bed. She thought of Ada, angry and defeated, her young life slipping through her fingers. And then she thought of her shop, the ashes of her hard work swept away by the wind. But, she hesitated, what if the whispers mean it's my only chance? What if this is the answer I've been waiting for? Mama Agnes leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "If you walk this path, know that there are rows. Do not speak of the coffin to anyone. Return to it every night, no matter what happens. And most importantly, never, ever open your eyes while inside." "What happens if I do?" The elder's face turned grim. "You will see the spirits for what they truly are. And once seen, they cannot be unseen." For a long moment, Nneka sat frozen, the weight of the elder's words settling in her chest. She didn't know whether to believe Mama Agnes, but the whispers from the night before rang in her ears. "Wealth awaits if you dare." Nneka couldn't sleep. Mama Agnes's words haunted her, but so did the whispers that had grown louder, more insistent. The next morning, she ventured into part of Makoko she'd never dared to visit. Her first stop was an old herbalist, Karim, who was known for his strange remedies and rumored connections to the spirit world. His shack smelled of damp earth and bitter herbs, and talismans hung from every corner. Karim's gaze was sharp as he listened to her story. "The night spirits," he asked, his voice a low growl. "You shouldn't meddle with them, girl. Their promises are poison wrapped in gold." "But they can help me," Nneka argued. "I need their blessing." Karim shook his head. "The spirits take more than they give. They thrive on desperation. If you choose their path, you will not return unscathed. Despite his warning, Karim told her where to go. A crumbling shrine at the edge of the lagoon. But don't say I sent you, he warned. Later that night, Nneka found herself at the shrine. The air was heavy, and the place felt alive. Shadows seemed to shift even when she stood still. At the center of the shrine was an inscription, half erased by time, but the words she could make out showed her. Blessed is the seeker who dares to embrace the spirits. But cursed is the one who falters in faith. As Nneka left the shrine, a figure stepped out of the darkness. It was Obi. You've been acting strange, Nneka, he said, his tone more concerned than accusing. Where were you just now? Nowhere, she lied, avoiding his gaze. Don't lie to me, he pressed. I heard people talking. You went to Karim, didn't you? You're getting mixed up in something dangerous. Stay out of it, Obi, she snapped. This isn't your problem. It will be if you destroy yourself over it. But she pushed past him, her determination outweighing his concern. At home, Ada confronted her too. You're scaring me, Nneka. Mama wouldn't want you to throw your life away chasing whatever this is. Then what should I do? Nneka shouted. Let her die. Let us all wither away here. Ada fell silent, her face pale. The silence that followed was heavier than the tension between them. That night, Nneka sat by the water's edge, the moonlight casting long shadows over the slum. She thought of her mother's frail body, Ada's bitterness, and her own constant failures. The whispers returned, louder now, weaving through her thoughts. Wealth awaits, but only for the bold. She clenched her fists, her mind racing. What if Karim and Mama Agnes were wrong? What if this was her one chance to rise above the ashes of her life? But what if they were right? What if she lost everything that mattered? The words on the shrine played over and over in her mind. Blessed is the seeker who dares, cursed is the one who falters. The next day, everything unraveled. The hospital called again, this time more aggressively. If payment isn't made by tomorrow, we'll be forced to discharge your mother, the nurse said coldly. Later, she discovered that the landlord had already rented her former store to someone else. Finally, Ada's rage boiled over. You're useless, she screamed. You can't save Mama. You can't save me. You can't even save yourself. That night, Nneka had a dream, or what she thought was a dream. She was standing in a vast, dark void, and before her was the coffin, its surface glistening like oil under moonlight. A voice called to her, deep and resonant, echoing in the emptiness. You will suffer no more. Sleep, and you will rise above them all. When she awoke, her decision was made. The day crawled by in misery. Nneka moved through it like a ghost, her thoughts churning with despair. Her mother was hours from being sent home, untreated. The landlord's smug refusal to reconsider his decision rang in her ears. Ada had stopped speaking to her entirely, retreating into bitter silence. By sunset, Nneka found herself back at the edge of the lagoon, the murky water reflecting the burnt orange hues of the dying day. She stood there, unmoving, watching fishermen haul in their empty nets. Somewhere in the distance, a funeral drumbeat echoed faintly, rhythmic and haunting. A voice startled her. You seek them, don't you? Nneka turned sharply to see a man standing a few paces away. He was draped in a faded green agbada, his face hidden in the growing shadows. His voice was deep, steady, and unnervingly calm. Who are you? She asked. That doesn't matter, he replied, stepping closer. His face, now visible, was unremarkable save for his eyes, too sharp, too knowing. But I know what you need. And I know who can give it to you. Her heart raced. The spirits. The man nodded. Their gifts are not free, but they are real. And they've been waiting for you. He gestured for her to follow, and though her instinct screamed to run, her feet moved of their own accord. He led her deeper into the labyrinth of Makoko, past narrow alleys and ramshackle homes, until they reached a dilapidated shrine. It was far older and grander than the one Karim had sent her to, a forgotten relic of a time when gods and spirits ruled openly. The man lit a small lantern, illuminating carvings along the walls. Nneka squinted, recognizing the same symbols she'd seen etched into the shrine and the amulet Mama Agnes carried. "They say it was built for the spirits of the night," the man began, his voice reverent. "Once, they walked among us, powerful and generous, but jealous. They demanded loyalty, and when the people faltered, they retreated into the shadows. But not before leaving behind a way to summon their blessings." He placed the lantern near an altar, and Nneka's breath caught. There, resting on a pedestal, was an intricately carved miniature coffin, no bigger than a loaf of bread. Its black surface gleamed, as though alive, and she swore she saw faint ripples of movement beneath its surface. "The full coffin is hidden," the man continued, "but this is the key. If you wish to find it, you must take this with you. Keep it close, and it will guide you." Nneka hesitated, her eyes locked on the tiny coffin. The whispers had returned, louder now, clearer, urging her forward. "Take it. Wealth awaits." "What happens if I don't?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The man's gaze hardened. "Then you will stay as you are. Empty-handed. Empty-hearted. You will lose everything you have left." Her hand trembled as she reached for the miniature coffin. The moment her fingers touched its surface, a cold jolt shot through her arm, and the whispers turned into a deafening chorus. The man stepped back, his form dissolving into the shadows. "You've chosen, Nneka. The spirits are watching. Be ready when the time comes." Before she could respond, the shrine seemed to groan, the air growing heavy with an unseen presence. Nneka stumbled backward, clutching the miniature coffin, her chest tight with fear and anticipation. When she looked up again, the man was gone, and the shrine was silent. She turned and fled, her mind racing with a mixture of dread and hope. As she approached her home, her eyes caught a faint shimmer in the corner of her room. There, lying on her thin mattress, was a note scrawled in shaky handwriting. "Midnight. The Lagoon."